Good morning, everybody. I think we're just about ready to start. Continuing from yesterday, but it's a new angle. So if you weren't here yesterday, that's okay. I'm just going to give maybe a 60-second summary about the idea we spoke about yesterday, and that will tie into the continuation, which is today. So yesterday we discussed the Kabbalistic concept that's called the worlds of chaos and the world of order. And in short, we said that the way the spiritual worlds evolve, and that's also expressed within our world, is very often first you have chaos and then you have order. And chaos means a very powerful force that sometimes expresses itself in a destructive way. And then later you have a secondary force, which is a force of order, where the energy is not as powerful, but that can correct the chaos that was created. And in the language of the Kabbalah, when God first creates the world, so first you have the 10 sefirot, the 10 emanations of God's energy is very powerful. And because it's so powerful, it cannot be contained within the vessels, and the vessels shatter. And because they shatter, it creates destruction, and the vessels fall very low, and that creates all sorts of negative phenomenon on earth, destructive forces on earth. And later, God then projects a limited degree, dimmed lights. Now we have the same 10 lights, but they're dimmed, and that could begin the concept of what we call tikkun, correction and holiness. And then we go back and we try to correct the shattered vessels. And in the Kabbalistic thought, the purpose of our world is to correct the shattered vessels. Once you correct the shattered vessels, you have the best of both worlds, meaning you have the powerful energy, but you also have the proper vessels and the proper expression of that powerful energy. So that's what we discussed yesterday. In just a short example from yesterday is the concept of emotion. Emotion is very powerful within a person, but emotion, if they're raw emotions and they're not affected by the maturity of the mind, what could happen is that powerful force of emotion could cause destruction, and it won't allow me to be productive because I'm just given to emotional extremes, and whatever I feel completely. If I have a bad day, then I look at the day as only bad. If I have a good day, it's only good. I'm not able to see the complexity. And that could lead to destruction. If I could then introduce the world of order, which is the world of intelligence, and what intelligence does, in a way, it weakens the power of emotion. It makes the person more calm, but it also allows for the person to be able to contain the emotion and channel it. So that's an expression, that is just an expression within the person where the concepts of chaos and order play out. And again, the key here is that chaos is the source of all negativity, but chaos is not negative at all. In fact, the source of chaos is higher than the source of holiness. And somehow all of creation is about the marrying of the chaos and the order. And we discussed that for a period of time yesterday. But again, this is a very important Kabbalistic principle and general principle, and it repeats itself all over the Kabbalistic and the Hasidic literature. So we can elaborate upon that, but we'll save that for another time. Now we want to look at a different angle of this story. What we want to look at is, okay, so now the vessels have been shattered. Now we're living in a world where we have fragments of the world of chaos, of the holy powers of the energy of chaos. But those fragments are everywhere, but those fragments also are not in touch with their source, and they're not in an orderly fashion, so they don't cope, so they create chaos. Our job is to, in the language of the Kabbalah, we have to collect those sparks and bring them back to their source. If you can think of the metaphor of you have this powerful light, powerful surge of electricity that shatter the light bulb. Now, the light bulb, we have to gather the pieces and recreate the light bulb. And I like the metaphor of the light bulb because The light bulb is a wonderful thing. It's a vessel for the energy. It's a vessel for the electricity that allows for the light to be produced. But think about it. Once it's been shattered, now the light bulb, not only is it not positive, but in fact, the light bulb becomes negative, right? Why is it negative? It can hurt you. You pick up the pieces, it can hurt you. If you don't know how to handle it properly, it can hurt you. So this is a metaphor where we have to go what the Kabbalah calls birur hanitzotzot. Nitzotzot is sparks, and we have to refine the sparks of chaos and reconnect them to their supernal source, and that's what creates peace and harmony in the world. And as we will see, that's also what creates peace and harmony within the person. So we'll try to elaborate, and hopefully this will be at least somewhat understandable. So we'll start with the metaphor. The metaphor, this is a metaphor that is brought in Hasidic philosophy. The source I'm quoting is from Rabbi Shneur Zalman, the founder of Chabad, in his book Torah Or. So we have the metaphor. This is a very interesting metaphor. We're trying to find a metaphor where for the world where all the holiness is present in the world. It's present, but if we don't treat it the right way, not only is it not positive, it's negative. Similar to the world of chaos. The energy of chaos is here, it's present, it could help us, but if we don't channel it, we don't understand it properly, it's not positive, it's actually destructive. So here's the metaphor that Rabbi Shneur Zalman gives. It's a nice metaphor. The metaphor is, okay, maybe we need another introduction. Okay, one more introduction, which means one more detail to introduce about the breaking of the vessels. So yesterday we discussed that the possibility for evil comes from the breaking of the vessels. In other words, if God is good and everything comes from God, where does evil come from? So there has to be a disconnect between the source and the manifestation of evil down here. And we said that's why typically in holiness, the way things evolve or devolve, depending on your perspective, it's called Hishtalshalut, chain of worlds. The problem with the chain is that in a chain, even the lowest rung is connected to the highest rung. There's no disconnect. So if you're in the realm of holiness, even if you're on the lowest level, you feel your source. So how do you have evil in the world? Evil defined as something or an energy or a person that doesn't feel connected to its spiritual source. The way you do that, the way that it occurs is through the shvira, the break. When you have a break, the thing shatters and falls down, so it falls down very low. It feels disconnected from its source, as we discussed. Another point, which I mentioned yesterday in short, in passing, but to elaborate upon it, is this also explains where you have multiplicity from unity, right? So you have Hashem Echad, God is one. And then when you have one, if you look around the earth, the universe, there's trillions, I can't even fathom the amount of multiplicity of various different creations. So how do you move from one to the many? So again, the metaphor of the breaking of the vessels shows how one thing, if it shatters, can become many. And what we want to look now again is see how do we make from the many one. So that's what we're playing with. That's the metaphor we're playing with. So the metaphor is as follows. It's a very simple metaphor. The metaphor tells you is imagine you have a word, and the same metaphor works for a word, a sentence, a paragraph, a chapter, a book. Same thing. So you have a word, and the word is a vessel. The word is a container for a specific idea, right? So the word blessed, those letters, Bet, Reish, Vav, Chaf, Baruch, those letters contain an idea. They contain the idea of blessing. Wonderful. What happens if you have those same letters, and again, letter is the container that contains the idea. If you have those same letters, but instead of reading them properly, for whatever reason, those letters have been scrambled. So now you can't read it. You don't see the meaning. Not only you don't see the meaning, that's one problem. Now you're also confused because you see various energies. You see different letters. Each letter is pulling you in another direction if you're trying to guess the meaning from these letters. So first of all, you don't see the light. Second of all, you're in the darkness. Not only in the darkness, you're now in the state of multiplicity. Multiplicity is there's no one truth. There's no one unifying idea that unifies all these letters. It's true about a word. It's true about a sentence, a paragraph, a book. If you have a 1,000-page book, and the 1,000-page book ultimately has one idea, right? And the idea creates unity throughout all the pages of the book. and throughout all the various different expressions of this idea, but there's only one idea. There's one unified theory behind all this entire book. But that's only if you know how to read it properly. If you don't know how to read it properly, if they were scrambled, now all you have is multiplicity. And it's not only multiplicity, it's like a break. What does it mean, a break? It's disconnected from its source. When you have a book, that there are many words, but those words tie you back to the author, because those words are containers for an idea, and the idea is tied back to the author. So I read your book, I know something about you. Now, what happens if you wrote the 1,000-page book, and then for whatever reason, maybe in the printing press, there was something that they imagine in the old printing press, they used to put in each letter. So you have a bucket of all the letters, and it fell down. Now they're scrambled. So now you just take and you put all the letters on the page in an unorganized way. And what happens is, again, you have confusion. You have multiplicity of so many different ideas that don't make any sense. You also have disconnect from its source. You don't see how these ideas trace back to this book traces back to the author, because you don't see the meaning. You don't see the overarching oneness. You don't see the unity. Says the Kabbalah, that is the world we're looking at. We're looking at the world. The world was supposed to tell a story about the Creator. King David says in the book of Psalms, I think it's chapter 19, we say it every Shabbat morning, early on in the prayer, Hashamayim misaprim kavod el. The heavens tell the story of the glory of God. Right? You have all these creations, all this complexity, and you say, wow, they must come from the Creator. This is the brilliance of the Creator. Maimonides elaborates upon that theme as well. But the point is, you look at the universe is supposed to be telling you a story of unity. Now the problem is that if we don't know how to read the story, instead of seeing a story of unity, we see a story of multiplicity. We see various forces fighting with each other and pulling at each other. Parenthetically, it's only recently in the last 100 years that the sciences starts finding sort of unifying theories in the universe and actually discovering the unity. So even the science will tell you that there's more unity than appears to the naked eye. But spiritually speaking, it's the same concept. Think about it as everything, the origin of everything is within Hashem, within the oneness of God. Then God sort of tells a story. He creates multiplicity, but it's like an author writing 1,000 pages, not because he wants 1,000 different ideas. 1,000 different ideas, you don't need a book. 1,000 different ideas, how he wants to weave the 1,000 different experiences into one overarching message. That's God creating the multiplicity within the universe. The purpose of the multiplicity, however, is to see the unity within. However, because of the breaking of the vessels, we don't see the phenomenon on earth as telling the story of God. We see the letters, but we see the letters in a scrambled way. So what's our job? Our job is to put those letters in perspective, to put it in the context of an overarching idea. Now those letters are no longer distracting. Now those letters are not only not disturbing to the story, but in fact those letters actually tell of the unity, tell of the unity of God through the multiplicity, and ultimately, as we will see, that's the purpose of our creation, and that's the purpose of everything we do. So that's just a metaphor to set the stage for the theoretical idea of these raising of the sparks, and now we'll try to explain it a little bit more. So to elaborate a little further, there's everything has to go back to a biblical story, because even though it's people really want to learn, but a good story can always a good story can always express it better. So there's always a biblical story. So again, the Hasidic teachings teach that you see this in the biblical story of the dream of Joseph. So we'll talk about the dream of Joseph in a moment, but if you think about it, all of Jewish history, at least the Jewish history in the 5 books of Moses, if you trace everything back so we came out of Egypt, we go to Egypt. Why were we in Egypt? Well, we were in Egypt because the brothers sold Joseph, right? If you trace back the origins of what got us to Egypt, is the brothers sold Joseph to Egypt. Why did the brothers sell Joseph to Egypt? Because they were jealous of him. Why were they jealous of him? Well, primarily because of Joseph's dreams. So why am I saying this? I'm saying this because Joseph's dreams are important to understand. So it's not just a technical thing, oh, Joseph happened to have a dream, but this dream of Joseph really paved the course of Jewish history. So it's not just any dream. Every detail of that dream is important from the perspective of the Hasidic philosophy. So what's Joseph's dream? Joseph's dream is, he tells his brothers, we're all binding bundles in the field, and all of a sudden my bundle rises up, and your bundles surround me and bow down to my bundle. And that's the dream. And the brothers get very upset. They say, obviously, you want to be our king. You want to rule over us. We don't like you. We're going to get rid of you. We're going to sell you as a slave. Okay. Now, what's this metaphor of binding bundles? Could have been anything else. We were sitting on the beach chair, and everybody got up and bowed down to me, right? What's binding bundles? Why that specific scenario? So the conventional answer is it's about grain, because indeed Joseph becomes the leader in association with grain. When there's a famine, nobody has any food. Joseph is the only one with the grain. They all come to him and bow down to him because they want grain. It's like they're not really bowing to him; they're bowing to the grain. But that's another story. So that is the conventional story, the conventional interpretation. The Hasidic interpretation, however, is that the reason why the dream is that they're all in the field and binding bundles in the field. The dream opens, Vihine, behold, we're binding bundles in the field. Says the Rabbi Shneur Zalman. The reason why this is the scenario, the place where the dream, where the tension plays out, is because that's what the Jewish souls do. When we are in this world, what are we doing? We're binding bundles in the field. If you want to know what's my mission statement in life, my mission statement in life as a Jew, I bind bundles in the field. What does it mean to bind bundles? Binding bundles. So binding bundles represents the spiritual service of I'm taking many stalks, and every stalk seems to be something separate and independent. And binding bundles means I'm uniting them into one. So I'm taking different physical experiences that seem to have nothing in common, but I'm binding them because they're all part of one spiritual story. And by doing so, I'm elevating them and bringing them back to the source. Remember, just like when I had the book and I scrambled the letters, that disconnects me from the author. But if I could now rearrange the letters in a way where I could see within the world, if I can see within the letter, the story, the overarching truth, the overarching oneness, then brings me closer to the author. So in short, when we engage in physical activity, we're eating breakfast, eating lunch, going to work, whatever, we're doing exercise, whatever we're doing, every moment of the day could be a fragmented stalk of grain. And what's our job? How do we bring the unity? If everything I do has an overarching purpose or an inner purpose that unites it, then I'm creating the oneness. I'm sort of threading all of this diversity into one big story. And that story is the spiritual story that unites it. Why am I doing all of this? I'm doing all of this for a specific purpose. So the various experiences are now united with one purpose. And if they're united with one purpose, then I'm creating the unity in the multiplicity within the world. And I think this is true now more than ever, because now more than ever, we live a fragmented lives. Every person has to balance various roles, various hats, juggle different roles. And within our day, we're being pulled in so many directions because of technology and because of the modern life and because of other reasons. And this sense of fragmentation could be very troublesome to some people and sometimes. But if I can bring in the concept of there's a unifying goal in everything I do, that creates some degree of peace and wholesomeness and oneness, and that also has psychological benefits. So there's the concept of, for example, just the most basic example. Let's divide our day into the spiritual and the physical. You have the moments that the moments that you're living your life because you really are in touch with what you're doing. So it could be a spiritual experience. It could be spending time with family. It could be spending time with friends. It could be studying Torah, whatever it may be, the more meaningful moments of life. Then there's the moments of life that are just a distraction, right? I have to wait online in Whole Foods. I don't want to wait online in Whole Foods. I'd rather do other things. But my life is full of errands, literally and figuratively. These are things that I don't really want to do. There's really no meaning inherent in that concept. It's just that it serves something else, so I do it. And some people, because of modern life, most of their day, they're running around running errands. I don't mean just literally running errands, taking your clothing to the cleaners. I mean that these are things that I don't really need to do it. It's just serving something else. And if you have a whole to-do list of errands, literally and figuratively, this could be very draining. But what happens if a person sees the unity within everything they do? So my job is to serve God. My job is to lead a spiritual life. And every detail that I do is part of that overarching story. If I'm able to see that, then what I'm really doing is I'm binding the bundle. And if I'm binding the bundle, is I'm feeling the unity within everything I do. If I feel the unity within everything that I do, then that is the way of rectifying the broken vessels, because part of what I'm doing is I'm connecting every individual experience, which used to be just a physical experience, but now it's part of a greater story. And anytime I do a mitzvah, anytime I do a good deed, or anytime I do something neutral, such as just take care of my own needs, I eat breakfast, and then I take that energy and use it to do something good, what I'm really doing is I'm connecting all those experiences with the oneness of God and creating unity in the world. And the language of the Kabbalah, creating unity within my own life. I'm creating order within the fragmentation of my life, but I'm also creating unity in the universe. In the language of the Kabbalah, I am elevating the sparks and I'm reconnecting everything to its source. So I think that is a good introduction. And perhaps we'll open up the floor if somebody wants to make a comment or two. Otherwise, we continue. Here we go. The floor is open. If anybody wants to share something, it's wonderful. Otherwise, we'll continue. Okay, seems like everything makes sense. You see the unity in everything I'm saying. That's wonderful.
Rabbi, Rabbi?
Go ahead, yes.
The second dream by Joseph, did that pertain to the same issue?
The second dream of the Joseph is interesting. It's a little bit different, but in some ways, it also has the dream of unity, because if you think about the second dream of Joseph is about the stars. Now, one way to look at both dreams is both dreams are really saying the same point. Both dreams are saying that the tribes are bowing to Joseph. So why do you have to say it twice? So one way to think about this is the difference between the two dreams. It's the same message, but the two dreams happen. The first dream happens in the field, and the second dream happens in the sky, in the heavens, right? So it's the same theme. I'm just gonna. It's the same dream, but the place where it plays out either in the field or in the heaven. So the way the Hasidic interpretation reads this is that there's a very important part of this dream. If the dream is unity, trying to explain a different phenomenon actually combined to become one, and really that's what Joseph stood for, but that's another story, then you see the same theme playing out in the field and in the heaven. And one message to us is that the Jew is the same person regardless if he's in the field or he's in heaven. So when is the Jew in heaven? When are you in the skies? When you're studying Torah, when you engage in holiness. When are you in the field? You're in the field when you're engaged in material pursuits. And if you look at both dreams as a whole, you're saying the same person, the same scenario plays out in the field and in heaven. You're just as close to God when you're at the workplace or as if you're in the synagogue, because there's a certain unity. Again, if you look at heaven and earth as conflicting realities, then that's the product of the breaking of the vessels. But if you realize that these are different phenomena, but they're all part of one overarching story, that both the heaven and the earth is the arena where we play out, where our connection to God plays out, then you're in touch with the correcting of the vessels. You're creating the unity out of the diverse experience, and you're getting back to the source. So in that sense, the way we think about this is that we connect both at both dreams, and we could say that a Jew is simultaneously in heaven and on earth. Even when you're in the earth, you're in heaven. If that makes any sense.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, now that we solved Now that we solved all the problems of our life, we created the unity and all the fragmentation of our life. See, now I don't have to worry about this. But before Corona, a lot of too much of my day is literally sitting in the car, right? You have to take the kid to carpool, you have to come back, and then it's snowing, and then there's traffic. It's like enough with the carpool, right? And it's distracting because the carpool, you look at the carpool as what is carpool? I'd rather not be here, right? It's just that I have no choice. I need to get to my destination, so I have this hour to play out. And I can go through my day and I can start checking off all the things that I don't want to do. I'm just doing it for something else. So this half an hour from 10 to 10:30, this is exactly where I want to be. So don't worry about it. I don't want to be anywhere else. But to get here, I have to make my coffee. I have to heat up the water. I have to go to the grocery store to buy the coffee. It doesn't end, right? All the things you need to do to be able to get you to destination. So let's go back to the carpool metaphor. So the carpool metaphor is very upsetting. But then you get this little shift in your head and you realize that you want to get home from the carpool. Why do you want to get home from the carpool? Because finally you're going to get home and you can relax and you can talk to your children. Well, it just so happens to be that your children are more likely to talk in the carpool than they are to talk at home, right? So if the purpose is to bond with your children, then maybe the carpool is just as good as the home. Maybe it's better. In other words, it's not clear. Once you start saying, once you're in touch with my inner purpose is to create a spiritual existence for me, for my family, for the world, etc., then it's all of a sudden the carpool and the destination get much closer than you thought they were. You thought they were just two separate things. One's a distraction, one's the purpose, but I'm not sure. But then everything becomes blurry because you start seeing the purpose in the distraction. In other words, in what you thought was a distraction. You start seeing the purpose in the errand. You start seeing the heaven in the earth. So you get much more of a unified sense, and there's much less fragmentation, inner fragmentation within the person's own life. So that's just a pitch for the carpool. So I can't wait till all the restrictions are lifted. You can get back to the carpool and start connecting again. No, I'm only half joking. Okay, now let's think globally. So I know we solved all the problems in my life. Now we're going to worry about the whole world. So we just said that the purpose, we said yesterday and today, the purpose of the entire creation ultimately is to fuse the order and the chaos, to take the energy of the world of chaos and to express it in an orderly fashion, in a productive and a constructive way. And when you do that, the world has reached completion. The Messianic era appears. So when does the Messianic era appear? When does the world reach completion? So in short, the way the Kabbalah looks at this is that ultimately speaking, every Jewish person, when you're going to take something physical and you use it for a mitzvah, what you're doing is you're taking the fragment of the broken vessels and you're bringing it back to its source. So you ate matzah. If you ate matzah, you took a piece of flour. What is flour? Grain. What is grain? Something physical that originates in the world of chaos. And you connected it to God. You connected it to its source. And that's elevating a spark. You're finding the spark in the grain, and you're bringing it back to its source. Wonderful. When does Mashiach come? When does the world reach perfection? The world reaches perfection when all the fragments of all the sparks have been elevated. But here's the way it works. When you elevate the spark, you're not only elevating the specific spark, you're elevating the entire chain that produced this spark. Because all the energy invested in this one spark is spiritual energy from the world of chaos, that now when you elevate the spark, you're actually elevating all that entire chain of production that produced this. So when you make your matzah, and how was the matzah produced? Well, there was a truck that plowed the field. Okay, well, where was the truck produced? In China. Okay, who built the who built the plant, who designed the plant, who went to school to design the plant. Okay? So you can start going back and realizing how when we have Jewish people throughout the entire world, and every person does a mitzvah, and it's not just one generation, it's really a collective of all generations. And every time we do a mitzvah, every time we do something that's holy, we are not only elevating this specific experience, but we're elevating all the energy that and the ideas and the investment that allowed for this experience to take place. And all that is then strung together and threaded together and organized in the metaphor of the book. You put those few sentences in line, now everybody sees what it's here for, and you're connecting it back to its source. So think about like an 1,000-piece puzzle or maybe a 1,000,000,000,000-piece puzzle, and every person has one section of their puzzle that they're playing around with. But it's not only the mitzvah directly, it's also everything that allows for the mitzvah to take place. So I have to build a house. It takes me 2 years. Then I have to go earn money to build a house. Forget about how much money it takes. And money takes effort to earn the money. And I finally build a house, and I finally build the mansion, and I finally open the door and invite somebody else to my home, performing a mitzvah, connecting to somebody else, creating a spiritual bond. The moment I do that, I'm not only elevating this moment, I'm elevating the house, the energy that built the house, the tractors that built the house, the firm that designed the house, the money earned, the effort earned for the money to buy the house, et cetera, et cetera. And if you can, you'll probably have to design a big computer program to figure out how every mitzvah we do, all the various sparks that are going to be elevated when we do the mitzvah. But historically, there's a full chapter about this in Tanya, the 37th chapter of Tanya. I printed out some of it for myself, but I don't know if we're going to read it inside. But it's a beautiful concept, how when all the souls of Israel, scattered throughout the entire world, and it's also scattered throughout the entire history. And when every person does a mitzvah, ultimately, what we're going to do is every spark in this world is going to be affected and is going to be reconnected to its source. And when that happens mystically, then also in the most physical expression in this world, the chaos in this world will come into order, may it be speedily in our days. This is the story.